Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're digging into a crisis that's pretty much hiding in plain sight, burnout in our healthcare system. It's this silent epidemic that's hitting the very people we trust with our health, which means, well, it means it ultimately affects every single one of us. So let's get right to the heart of it.
We've all been there, right? Putting something off, and then we beat ourselves up, calling it laziness. But what if it isn't a character flaw at all? What if it's actually a biological misfire happening inside your brain? Turns out, understanding this really common human feeling is the key to unlocking the much bigger crisis that's going on in our hospitals and clinics.
So neuroscientists have a name for this, a dopamine timing glitch. Basically, your brain's go now signal is showing up late to the party. It fires after you've finished the task, not when you actually need that jolt of motivation to start. So see, it's not a moral failing, it's just a biological mismatch. Now just imagine that feeling, that delayed reward, but you scale it up across an entire profession. That's where we start to see what healthcare burnout really is.
Okay, so let's zoom out from that one little brain signal to the entire healthcare environment, because this is not about a few tired doctors. No way. This is about a whole system that is flashing red alert, staring down a crisis of absolutely staggering proportions. The scale of this is just shocking. A national survey of medical trainees found that almost 3/4, nearly 72%, are experiencing burnout. Over 60% are emotionally exhausted. And get this, more than half feel a sense of depersonalization. That's a really dangerous detachment from their work. These are not just numbers on a chart. These are the people caring for our parents, our kids, our friends, and they are running on fumes.
So, what exactly is burnout anyway? Well, the clinical definition calls it a psychological syndrome that pops up after dealing with chronic stress at work. It's got three key ingredients. First, there's just profound exhaustion, that feeling of being completely and utterly drained. Second is depersonalization, which is this sense of cynicism or detachment from your job. And third, a feeling of reduced personal accomplishment, that nagging feeling that nothing you do really matters.
To find a real solution here, we have to aim higher than just not being burned out. Researchers make this really critical distinction between satisfaction and fulfillment. Satisfaction, that's temporary. It's just about meeting expectations. But fulfillment, that's the deep, thorough realization of your potential. It's really the difference between having a good meal and living a meaningful life.
And honestly, the stakes could not be any higher. As researchers Brown and Gunderman put it, we ignored the subject of physician fulfillment at our peril. They argue it's not a luxury, it's a foundational pillar of any healthcare system that actually works.
So how do we fix this thing? Well, the solutions have to happen at every single level, and we're going to start with the individual. This is all about giving people the tools to reset their own inner clocks and take back some control over their lives and their careers.
One really interesting proposal is the structured 5-step plan for career and life planning. It's more than just setting goals. It starts with looking around, talking to people, and doing some deep self-reflection to figure out what success truly means to you, not what somebody else expects. Then, after you build a vision and a plan, the most important step is actually the last one. You've got to reassess and reevaluate regularly. This isn't a one-time fix, it's a constant process.
And hey, to get that dopamine clock working for you instead of against you, here are some quick, science-backed tips. Turn this huge projects into little 25-minute chunks. That way you get quicker dopamine hits. Or try rewarding the cue. So pair opening your laptop with your favorite song. A 5-minute walk in the daylight can literally charge up your brain's motivation circuits. And my favorite is the 2-minute start. Just commit to doing something for 2 minutes. A lot of the time, that's all it takes to get the ball rolling.
The power of choice is just perfectly illustrated right here. A study gave a mindfulness course to medical students. When it was mandatory for the first years, their satisfaction was, pretty mediocre. But when they made it optional for the second years, the scores shot up dramatically. The lesson here is crystal clear. You cannot force wellness. Giving people autonomy is everything.
Okay, so individual strategies are great, they're powerful, but they can't work in a vacuum. And that brings us to the next level, teams and organizations. The goal here is to build a culture where psychological safety isn't some kind of perk, it's just the default setting.
Some research on nurse-driven safety cultures gives us a fantastic blueprint for this. It's built on these pillars like having open communication without fear of getting in trouble, a shared sense of responsibility, and empowering the frontline staff, the people who see the problems first, to actually advocate for real change. It's not about blaming people, it's about fixing the system together.
And a huge part of that system is just having supportive relationships. Things like effective supervision and genuine mentorship, they aren't just nice-to-haves, they are absolutely essential. They provide what researchers call restorative support, which basically helps absorb the day-to-day tensions of the job and build a stronger, more resilient professional identity.
All right, for our last piece, let's zoom all the way out to the 30,000-foot view. Because to create change that really lasts, we have to tackle the entire system. And that means rewriting some of the fundamental rules that govern how we train and license our medical professionals.
This change has to start on day one of medical school. I mean, imagine if career and life planning wasn't just an afterthought, but a core part of the curriculum. What if students were given the tools and, just as importantly, the time to develop their own plans for fulfillment? What if we embedded the science of work-life balance right into their training from the get-go?
And it really shouldn't stop at graduation. Here's a really powerful policy idea. What if we made burnout prevention and self-care training a mandatory part of renewing your professional license? So just like you have to stay up to date on clinical practices, maintaining your own well-being would finally be recognized as an essential professional skill. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Burnout is not an individual failing that we can fix with yoga and a few mindfulness apps. It is a systemic problem. It was born from a culture that has demanded way too much and supported way too little for way too long. The only real solution has to be a ripple of recovery, one that starts inside our own minds and expands out through our teams, our institutions, and all the way up to our national policies.
And that brings us to the final crucial question. Our healers are hurting. So the question is, what part will each of us play in their recovery? Thanks for digging into the answer with us today.